myself a drink here, but the too much foam everywhere. Bad pour. Ashamed.
It doesn't matter. You're at home. Nobody can watch. Nobody can see you.
Welcome to episode 35 of Stories from a Bar, virtual edition today. I'm your host, Chris Osborne, and for this episode, I am chatting with Jack McGarry. Did I say that right?
You did, yeah, you did.
Excellent. Co-founder of the Dead Rabbit Grocery and Grog in Lower Manhattan. How are you, sir?
I'm hanging in there, the same as everybody else, I guess, at the minute.
It is, like I said, first off, thanks for taking the time to do this. I greatly appreciate it. I'm sure you're a busy guy, and I know we've been back and forth on trying to get something set up for a while. So I'm excited it's finally happening.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, and let me apologize if you see me just looking sideways constantly. It's just my notes are to the side. So it's...
No problem.
I mean, to give you a heads up so it doesn't look like I'm not paying attention or anything like that. The original plan, of course, was to meet back in December. And, of course, things got a little busy that time of the year. We had to reschedule. We were going to try to reschedule for something in like April or March. And then, of course, the whole COVID thing happened and just everything went from, 100 miles an hour to zero. And it doesnbut take much prodding for me to take a trip down to the city. But like I said, everything just shut down. But we are finally here in September, getting a chance to chat, albeit on Zoom. And like I said, I'm super excited. A couple shout outs I definitely need to make first. I like to always shout out a New York brewery that I'm drinking. And actually for this time, I got a beer, just so happened the timing worked out well. I got a beer from downstate, LIC Beer Project over in Queens. I'm drinking their Coated Tiles. Cool. Yeah. Drinking their Coated Tiles Pale Ale, which is absolutely delicious. So a big shout out to them. We don't get a lot of, I live upstate in the Albany area, and we get occasional drops of their stuff around, but I was surprised to just stroll through the supermarket and saw this one. So I had to grab it. And of course, a second shout out goes to a common acquaintance of ours, Damien. And I'm not going to lie, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Back in Belfast.
Damien Cole.
Magyar, Mager, I think it's spelled.
Oh, sorry, Damien McGarry. McGarry,
yeah.
Damien, I used to work with McGarry. I used to work with Damien Lodge when I was 15, 16. So
that's how you guys knew each other.
Yeah, so he was a bartender in my first job. So he, as I said, that would have been, I'm 31 now, so that would have been 16 or so years ago. Yeah, and he was great bar boozer where we met.
Yeah, I met Damien. Well, I'm 37. I was probably 10 or 12 when I had actually met him, because he was part of I forgot what Project Children program in Ireland there, where they were sending large groups of kids to the States for the summer to, live with host families and get them kind of out of the area while I know there was fighting and stuff going on. I was certainly too young to understand what was happening. It was just summer would roll around and I knew I had a friend from Ireland coming to stay with us.
So I actually done something similar to that, but I was with a different group called Taranal. So that was in West Belfast. So I spent my summers, I think it was like Rove, when I was in my young teens, and I spent the summer in the summer.
Where was it you were in the States then when you would come over?
Philadelphia.
Oh wow! I actually haven't been to Philly.
Yeah,
it's
so
one
it was
of
good
those.
Fun.
I actually haven't been to Philly. It's one of those states or cities I'd love to check out, but obviously can't do that right now.
Yeah,
I've always heard awesome.
It's a great spot.
Like I said, I remember him coming over, and I remember having a lot of fun trying to get him to say stuff in the Irish accent. I think mostly aluminum at the time, which was hysterical if you're a 10-year-old and that's your first experience talking to someone with that heavy of an accent.
Yeah, so the same to me when I came over. It was I was made to say words, and to show that I actually came from Ireland. I definitely can share that experience with them.
It's interesting. Like I said, I was too young to understand, the infighting and things going on in Ireland at the time. What was it like growing up in Belfast with all that?
So I was fortunate. I sort of came in the back end. So the Good Friday Agreement was signed in 1998, being 9 years old. So there, I lived through a lot of the segregation and a lot of the violence, but it was much worse for generation than it would have been for mine. So I was spared the worst of it, but the city even at that young age and it might be insular and isolated. Where when I go back to Belfast now, it's much more progressive and diverse. It's a much more cultural kind of vibrant city. So it really has come on leaps and bounds. But getting obviously when I was younger to come to America, it was really great for me to see the people live their lives and the other opportunities that they were afforded and stuff like that. So it was definitely a experience for sure. And most of those programs are facilitated or structured kids out of Belfast around July, and because that's where a lot of the pro. So it was I thoroughly enjoyed my program. I'm sure Damien did as well.
Oh, yeah, I know. I remember him having a ball. I've heard a lot of things about Belfast. Fortunately, I've not been able to make a trip to the motherland, as I like to call it, being Irish myself. Belfast has always sounded great. And it's funny, though. I've gotten to the point where I'm hearing people that, of course, go, they love it. But if you want a real like Irish country experience, visit other towns, because Belfast is like just the main tourist attraction now.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could say the same could be said for Dublin and Belfast. You know, they're bigger city. Obviously, Dublin's a much bigger city, but
Or
they're
maybe I'm
big
thinking of
cities. I would
Dublin.
still advocate.
Maybe I
Yeah, well,
was.
Dublin particularly would be a much bigger advocate spending 3 to 4 days there, because you're still going to get there's a lot of rich and a lot of fantastic very old pubs and restaurants and a lot of culture. If you are to properly experience Ireland, it's that I always advise for people to get out, and because you can get from the bottom of Ireland to the top of Ireland within 6 to 7. Whereas obviously in America, that's in a lot of places you're not even out of one state. So it's brilliant to go there, spend a week or two, and just get as much as possible to take in the full breadth of the country.
Yeah, it's something that's definitely on my bucket list. Obviously, now these days, I have no idea when that'll happen. I haven't really kept up on the
Yeah.
news. I think Ireland was one of the first places to take the COVID virus seriously and actually shut down bars. I don't know how they've held up.
Well, they've started reopening sort of space where the likes where you would be at right now. They've reopened indoor for venues that serve food. They don't obviously, but that the big thing there is there's a lot of bars in Ireland that don't serve food, so they're still completely closed. The infection rate seems to have stabilized there, but it looks like it's starting to tick upward. Nice. So and they're starting to be they're starting to roll back as far as the last time I looked some of the restrictions. So we'll see. I guess I think we're all going to what this fall and winter looks like for everyone, because
Yeah.
nobody really has an idea of how it's going to go.
No, and we'll talk more about what the situation is down in the city in a little bit, because I'm upstate and it's almost totally different than
Yeah,
how it is down there. I
yeah,
always loved going down to the city. Like I said, I think it takes me just under 3 hours to get there on train, depending on whichever train I catch and the
yeah,
stops and whatnot. So it never took me much, prodding to go down there just to explore. I like to go to Ranger games. I was a big hockey fan. And when I was down there in December,
yeah,
even though we didn't have a chance to meet, I did actually stop at the Dead Rabbit and had a couple pints and just an amazing burger for lunch, man. It was awesome. I sat in
yeah.
the parlor there. It was a super cool environment. Of course, the sawdust on the floor, just pictures and history on the wall and things like that.
Because
And
we had the bar where we had the bar before we closed. It was the happiest we had ever been open for 7 years. So we changed actually quite a lot, and the bar was performing excellently. People were very happy. We were delighted with the menus and the product. Obviously, coronavirus happened, so it was one of those tales where you're a fan and you get stopped completely in your tracks, you know.
Yeah. And whenever I go down to the city, there's a couple spots I like to try to hit, mainly McSorley's, because that's just always a fun time.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
You always meet interesting people there. And I was chatting, I think one of the first times I went, we sat at a giant table with, random strangers as you do there. One woman was telling me she was friends from the drummer from Journey, I think, and she was going to his wedding, like out in Seattle, and Kiss was going to be playing there. I'm like, this is insane. And then I was talking to, she was there visiting her daughter, or like daughter-in-law or something like that. And then the daughter was telling me that she was there one day when Colin Farrell just came in stumbling drunk. I'm like, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's such, you hear those types of stories from, I remember one of the times I was in McSorley's, we were at one of those tables, sharing it with someone, and we were sitting beside a famous and like an operatic singer, and he told me, and this is when I drank, and a few drinks in me at that point, and he told me he was a tenor, so a singer, and I was like, I thought nonsense, and I was like, well, why don't you sing a song? And he got up and sung some famous song that I can't remember the exact words, but he sang it per operatic way, and the whole bar stopped and started singing with him. And in places in McSorley's were that like a New York moment like that. I've heard so many stories, like even the one you're telling. It's a bar such an bar.
Yeah, it's the oldest Irish pub in the city, 1854, I think it was. And one of my other favorite parts of it is just what do you want to drink? What beer, light or dark? That's it. Like simple, takes all the guesswork out of it. And so, I had lunch at the Dead Rabbit when I was there. It was actually the first time I'd have ever been down to the city in winter. I usually go in like spring or summer or fall.
Yeah.
So that was a fun experience for me, even though I didn't check out, the giant tree in Times Square. I didn't realize they had a giant one right outside on Wall Street, which I walked all around and everything like that. But, I ended up checking out the Dead Rabbit, which was awesome in the parlor. Like I said, great burger. Then I went to McSorley's, and then up, I don't know if it's considered the Upper East Side, but the Pony Bar up there, a pretty awesome craft beer place that was recommended to me. And then,
sounds like you had some trip.
Yeah, it was a quick ride home when I fell asleep on the train. Let's talk about the Dead Rabbit some, because like I said, you are the co-owner of it with another gentleman named Sean Muldoon, correct?
Yeah. My business partner, we came over here in the early 2000s to open up Dead Rabbit, and we opened in 2013. February 12th, 2013. It's been quite the ride.
Yeah, just looking into it and, just Googling the Dead Rabbit, because sometimes I actually do research for these podcasts. I mean, it looks like you guys have clearly worked your asses off to build that up in an amazingly short amount of time, it seems like. And, plus your prior accomplishments from what I saw from International Bartender of the Year, I believe. You were the youngest to ever win that.
Yep. Yeah, we've done well. We 2013, and we were fortunate that a couple of months after we opened, we won 3 awards, which included the International Bartender of the Year award. And we've obviously went on to win a whole other bunch more. And we're now in the stage of our like the bars. It's not in those lists or on those awards anymore because it's done so well. So, but it's the bar's at a different phase of its life now. So we're obviously involved in improving and bettering the bar, and we're now much more focused on bringing Dead Rabbit to other cities that make sense in America. But it's been a very intense, crazy ride. But we're still looking at it as we're getting started.
So how did you end up getting into the hospitality industry?
So it's in a way, I was constantly asking my mother and father for a land of money. It was money that you were asking for a land of that you had absolutely no use of paying back. So my mum had enough of this I think I was 15. I was looking for a pair of new shoes or something like that, and she said she had, and she said that if I wanted to go and if I really wanted the shoes or I really wanted anything that I and get my own money. So that was when I was there was a family connection on my side that had people working in the bar industry, and it was his cousin was the general manager of a bar that was right at the bottom of my street called the Hunting Lodge, which was in Belfast. So I was brought down by my father when I was 15 years old, and interviewed me for essentially a bar back home they call it a glass washer. So your chief focus is stocking bottles, stocking fridges, getting ice, keeping the floor clean, emptying out when people were smoking in bars. So he gave me the interview, gave me the remit, the gig, and that's where I got started in the Hunting Lodge, and that's actually when, as I said to you, so I worked there for a year and a bit, and then I wasn't around. He got opportunities to run other venues in Belfast, which then led on to meeting, getting involved with cocktails, which is that part is a whole other story. But it was I initially got into the industry to just make money, and accidentally fell in love with it.
That's awesome. I was gonna ask, at what point did you start thinking of trying to make a career in the hospitality industry? But it seems like it just came naturally to you.
Yeah, so it did come naturally, but there was definitely a moment. Up until that point, I'd wanted to be a geography teacher, and I necessary to go to very strange, but I idolized my geography teacher, and I thought that's what that's the life that. So, however, as I got deeper in, I followed my cousin around a bunch of bar in particular. It was called Cafe Vaudeville, which was in the city centre of Belfast, and it was what people in Ireland would call a style bar. And a style bar essentially means that it looked better, it served slightly better food and drinks. But they had brought Australia to do the drinks program in Cafe Vaudeville. It was a guy by the name of Mark Gofer, who's well known in Australia and obviously globally for his work, and trained the bartenders how to make the drinks and make the syrups and do the prep work and that and the other. And that was the first time I'd seen a cocktail bartender make drinks, and I thought it was really cool, but not much of it until I went and worked in a bar in South Belfast called Pat, and that's where I came across a guy by the name of Kieran Breen, and he was a former pupil of Sean Muldoon, partner. And he set up the program there and actually introduced me to Sean Muldoon of this thing called the Connoisseurs Club, which was set up by Sean at the he worked at the Merchant Hotel at that point. But basically, his whole thing was to bring the best in the world to Belfast to speak to our staff and speak to customers, and that included Petrotsky, Gary Reagan, Audrey Saunders, Dale DeGroff, like the who's who. Like I was at the front of these sessions scribbling down the notes, and it was really during those connoisseurs clubs where there was very much a career in this if you'd done it at an elite level. And in order to do it at that elite level in Belfast, I had to go and work with Sean Muldoon, my neighbour, and that ended up coming to fruition through a lot of backwards and forwards about a year, and then as I say, the rest is history, you know.
Yeah, that is super impressive. There is just so much skill that goes behind, making great cocktails and things like that, obviously, as you know. And just talking to some of the, drink mixers I've talked to. And I don't drink a lot of liquor myself. I'm more of a beer person. So when I do when I do make a drink, it's, nothing overly sophisticated. But I've just had some I've had some amazing ones that have certainly blown my mind just, watching, a person do their art and things like that. But you mentioned, of course, before you came over and opened the Dead Rabbits, did you at the Merchant Hotel in Belfast? Didn't you win World's Best Cocktail Bar when you were there?
Yeah, we did. So that actually is that was the kind of the catalyst for us actually coming, to be honest with you. So it was when I worked with Sean at the Merchant, when I had just started. Merchant was at a stage where it was winning like national awards, but it wasn't getting much international track. And when I came on board, Sean very much opened the door for my knowledge building and interactions, and showed me what world class looks like. But he then gave me the freedom in order to really grow in an organic way. And I then went on and purchased hundreds of books and studied actively in terms of I wanted to be the very, very best cocktail bartender in the world. I was able to greatly contribute to the bar program, which then freed Sean up to strategic stuff, which was obviously winning the worldwide award. So our first effort at the global awards was in 2007 for 3 awards, and we lost all 3.
Oh wow!
And then we asked, how do we win those awards? Like, what do we need to do? Because we felt at that time this program, and we felt that it deserved recognition. So caterers said, if you want your bar to win, you either have to bring your bar to the people. And what he means, either do pop-ups or guest bartending or residency like that, or bring the judges to your bar. And Sean obviously had this program club. And prior to that comment or that advice, we were very much focused on Europe's best speakers and Europe's best minds to speak to the staff and the wider clientele. But after that, there was a pivot and a ring of American judges, particularly because we looked at the story of the Irish coffee, and it was obviously invented in Ireland, but it was the Americans that made the Irish coffee such an iconic drink that it is today.
Interesting.
So we believed if we got the Americans to judge or see what we were doing, blow them away with our hospitality and our product offering, and obviously Ireland, they would go back and spread the word. And we instituted that change after 3 awards, and unfortunately enough, we were nominated for the exact same in 2008, and we won every single one. And then 2009, we were nominated for awards. We had won that as well, and that was during that time is when our angel had appeared, and he had seen that there was starting to become a bit of friction in the hotel. The hotel was going on they were at an extension, and it was going in a much more corporate direction.
Mm-hmm.
And we were obviously, that's not what we wanted. So he basically said, after we'd won the world's best, if we created a bar that he believed it wouldn't be here today, gone tomorrow, in Star, he would make it happen. And he lived in New York, and he said, let's do it in New York. And sure enough, Sean, my business partner, he was the first one out. I think he arrived over of that year, which would have been 2010. I arrived in 2000 September of 2011, and then we got the bar open, as I said, in 2013. At the beginning of 2013, we went through Hurricane Sandy considerably.
Yeah.
But we got open at the beginning of 2013. So that's the story.
So you guys were planning the bar before you even came over to the States, right?
Yep, 100%. Yeah, we started planning as soon as we started speaking investor. We started planning, like we had the name, we had a pretty fleshed out plan that became more and more fleshed out as we moved here. We knew from the get-go what we wanted to do.
Were there, I mean, I imagine it's super stressful starting a business anywhere. Are there added levels of stress when you're trying to do it from another country?
Yeah, fortunately, we got here fairly quickly, but that's not to say that the stress was mitigated. But in the naivety of, particularly naive, I think, of the angel investor was thinking that we would have had the bar open within 6 months. And in New York, as you know, nothing of that type of magnitude happened at that level.
Yeah.
Or at that pace. So it ended up taking years. So we spent the bulk of our time. We spent a bit of the time creating the concept in Belfast, but then it was obviously New York, and I think the New York was where the most difficulties happened because you're gone. We weren't making money. We were working in jobs that were, I mean, in terms of just getting, because we weren't there for those jobs. We were there for they open the Dead Rabbit. The money difficulties, the being away from family, the constantly lines and stuff like that. There was a lot of very dark days, but we both had absolute confidence and obviously the conviction necessary to see it through, because we believed that it would have definitely a big impact on the landscape of New York's Irish pubs and cocktail bars.
Mm-hmm. How'd you guys end up coming up with the name or settling on the name Dead Rabbit? I mean, I know a little bit of the story of where it comes from, ironically enough, from going to McSorley's.
Yeah.
I was chatting with the bartender, and he was pointing out news articles on the wall I could read. I'm like, this, again, another reason I love McSorley's. It's just covered in paraphernalia and awesome articles and things like that. But
it's amazing. It's amazing, yeah. Yeah, the name came from when our angel investor said to create your like, what's your idea of your own perfect bar. There was two loves we had in terms of our own bars. We loved the high end cocktail bar that we obviously operated in the 5-star hotel in Belfast, which was the Merchant Hotel cocktail bar. Also loves the down and dirty Irish pub, which is prevalent obviously in its accessibility, its inherent hospitality. And when we came to the building our own place, we wanted to. There seemed to be, from what we, particularly in that time of the bar that we were working in, and with our travels in New York, there was definitely a disconnect between hospitality and cocktails. There seemed to be a lot of pretension and that type of stuffiness in cocktail bars, and we really wanted to shatter that. And challenge the status. We wanted to bring together the hospitality of Ireland with world-class cocktails, so a pub are under one roof. So doing that, you can't just open a pub and a cocktail bar in New York City or anywhere really for that matter, without it having it has from a branding and strategy perspective. So we started looking into when does the cocktail movement and the pub Irish movement meet together in New York. I knew from the top line that you had the immigration, the extensive immigration due to the potato famine from Ireland into America in the 1850s. But then also coexisting with that, we also knew that Jerry Thomas wrote the first cocktail book. He wrote the Bartender's Guide in 1862. So we knew that there was something there, but we just needed him. And then it ended up being that when the immigrants arrived in New York, obviously they had to go through the Port Authority at that time, but they landed in Water Street or Lower Manhattan. Or the Water Street area where the bar sits on was dominated with McSorley's type bars. It was dominated by immigrants. Even the Charles Dickens famously said it was one of the most violent streets in the entire continent. So coexisting with that, and the pub, the Irish culture, the immigrant culture, you had the splendor of which had where Jerry Thomas was bartending, where Orson Willard was bartending, she had Sterling. You had the first luxury hotel of New York, the City Hotel, and you had saloons. It was so you had the squalor and splendor coexisting. You had the Irish happening right in the same place. And we settled on the name, the Dead Rabbit. We wanted a name that expressed that pubness. We wanted it to be very pubby. You've heard, and there's a lot of Irish and English pub names like the Slaughtered Hen or the Dead. Like there's all those types. We wanted something that had that stability.
Not something I really thought of until you just said that, but yeah.
Yeah, it's got that accessibility. So when we looked into, we started to look into New York gangs, and names of gangs, and so Sean was looking this up through Google, and up came gang affinities, or I can't remember the exact term, but it was a list of identities of those gangs in New York during the fourth gang down. You had the YOs, you had the Plug Uglies, you had a bunch of other ones, the Barry, but the fourth one down was the Dead Rabbit. And when we started looking into the Dead Rabbit, we loved the Dead Rabbit name. But when we started, it had that slaughter type feel about it. But when we looked into it, there was a particular person who brought it all together. One of the one-time leaders of the Dead Rabbit called John Morrissey, and he really encompassed stories that we're telling. He came here when he was a kid, settled upstate in Troy in Quebec, but he came back down into New York City when he was 18 years old, and ended up getting involved in rackets, and ended up becoming a leader of the Dead Rabbit. But he was a boxer. He went away as part of the 40s with the gold rush, and came back and started gambling saloons in Lower Broadway. He befriended the likes of Jerry Thomas. He founded the Saratoga. So he was really the person that brought together. He lived that Water Street pub element. So he lived the splendor, because he became quite wealthy, and he was all together. So that's the reason why we settled on the Dead Rabbit as a name, because it brought everything that we were trying to do together and made it one cohesive story.
Interesting. I didn't know he had spent any time in Troy, because that's the general area I live in, but it's like 20 miles to the west for me. It's like a 20-minute drive for me.
Yes. Right, so he spent quite a bit. I think he was in Quebec for a couple of months. So Sean is the one that had done a lot of research on John Morrissey particularly, but I believe he was 3 years old. He'd spent a couple of weeks or a couple of months in Quebec, but he had spent the majority in his young life until he was 18 in Troy. And yeah, so he's got a lot, and he's grave is I think it's in that area as well. I can't remember his grave, but it was such a long time ago. But Sean would be able to tell you those details.
Fascinating.
I mean, he's a nerd with that type of stuff. Yeah.
Funny. I'll have to look into that, where he was in Troy, because now I'm super curious about that.
Yeah.
You guys also kind of have a tagline, and I know this because, it's on your website, and I took one of your coasters when I was there. So, but born in a hurricane, forged in a fire. I keep this coaster just in my desk. It's just randomly in my desk now. But tell me a little bit about the born in a hurricane, forged in a fire saying that you have, because that's fascinating too. And you guys have definitely gone through your share of shit in a short amount of time to, like I said, keep the place open.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be the common denominator with Dead Rabbit is the adversity to have to. I mean, every business is fraught with difficulty and adversity. So I don't want to sit here and sound like I'm saying that we're unique in that situation, but we've had serious issues in a condensed period of time. So even the time of getting the bar open, I alluded to, was fraught with difficulty, and there was many times when many nights we came close to pulling the plug on it, but we seen it through. But obviously, up until we got open, we were severely delayed with Hurricane Sandy. So that's where the hurricane element, the forge and the fire. We had a fire that the kitchen early in the hours of July 1, 2018, and that basically it was to do. We had a serious heat wave in New York, where 4 days in a row were above 100 degrees. What happened at the top of our grease trap? It had liquefied the grease, and it had come back down. It ignited as soon as it hit. We make our own fries, so the guy was in early in the morning, and we 3 times. So he was doing the fries the first run, and basically the hit the liquefied grease, and it just caught, and it basically went all the way up through, and then came out the back of the building. So that's where a lot of our electrical was at that stage. So it pretty much toasted all the electrical components, and then they had to call the FDNY, and the FDNY came in and obviously ripped down water, like there was water everywhere, so there was just extensive damage. But we basically we again, any type of setback we have, we ourselves on and attack it with full vigor. So we were able to reopen, albeit without the hot food. Addressing the hot food took us quite a few months to remedy that. Reopen 18 days later. So it was all contractors engaged. Like it was full on. But we got back open 18 days later, which I think most other places it would have taken them back open, you know. So yeah, we're very fortunate, and obviously with this pandemic, so we'll have to add another sentence to that saying soon.
Yeah, let's see here. Born in a hurricane, forged in a fire, survived through a pandemic. There you go.
Yeah.
It's interesting being down for, in that situation, just based on your location, being down for any kind of significant amount of time, just because it seems like there's so many places in New York City that you could grab something to eat, get a drink. Literally, I mean, you could hit a different place every day and still not touch everything.
Yeah.
So I imagine it's, not like a smaller city where, you can rely on that business to come back, as soon as you open again. So I'm not used to that because, I mean, I live in Albany. There's a lot of great places. But, I mean, how do you set yourself apart in that kind of environment?
So our thing has always been to bring the Irish pub into the 21st century. And what we mean by that, when we first arrived in New York, well, first and foremost, in Ireland, Irish pubs are up to date with current trends, or particularly when it comes to talking about the movement. You go into a lot of pubs in Ireland, and this has obviously changed quite drastically in the past years. But a lot of the pubs they didn't do mixed drinks. They weren't really recognizing movement. They weren't recognizing the Irish whiskey at our own native spot. They didn't do food. There was just a lot of things operationally. They were very, for me, they were very regressive and stagnant. They were still authentically themselves, for sure, but as a complete opposite of that, we came to America, and Irish bars had no city. You go to Times Square, and particularly those ones in Times Square, but again, they're all over the city and indeed all over this country. They're what I would call they're McFakes, or they're just not real versions of Irish bars. They have an Irish type name, maybe a flag outside, and everything else about it is terrible. We really wanted to challenge the status quo first, that an Irish bar can be current. Like, we were reading all types of articles at that stage, and these articles still come out essentially saying is the ahead. So we wanted to challenge that. We wanted to show that it was current, but we also wanted to show that fantastic it could be of an unreal quality. So that's really what we use ourselves. We go all in with 4 key aspects now, which under our facts. So it's our food. We do everything is made in house. It's fresh. We don't frozen, and we aim to do great serves of dishes that make sense of contact. So obviously you talked about the burger, which is more American than it is, but we've got our pot pies, we have sausage rolls, Scotch egg. Our fries are made in house, as I said at the end. So we specialize and we focus on that. We focus on being authentic. Of the pictures on the walls, or we've commissioned photographers to go around Ireland and take those pictures that you can just pull from Google. And we have a lot of amazing that, like, we have stuff that's from the movie Gangs in New York that were proper pieces of the movie.
Oh, really?
So we've stuff that's authentic to us. Our cocktails, obviously, we fully focus on. Menus, we obviously make a lot of Irish whiskey drinks. We champion ourselves, and then what we also focus on is our trifecta. So the trifecta is the best in class, or the best in class serves of Irish whiskey, and the best in class serves of Irish whiskey cocktails. We hyper focus on those 4 things, and I believe that puts us in an amazing place of an amazing point of difference. But we also take the totality of the every element of the experience is important to us, and And I think that's what we really believe in the devil is in the details with every single aspect of our app, constantly looking to improve. We're never happy, so I think all those make us different to your standalone pub or operator that maybe has a pub up the street or in mid-team to open up the place. They get it to a level that they're comfortable with, and then it just stays that way for foreseeable future, where we're constantly tinkering, improving. We invest heavily into our employees, into improving the place, into our storytelling. So we're never standing, and we're even doing that right now in terms of, yes, we're closed, but we're reopening November 1. It's on outside catering, online events, our merchandise offering, delivery. Each one of those things that we're entering in to do the best that we possibly can. I think we're always going to be. I'm not really concerned about different ourselves, so to speak. It's more right now. It's making sure we don't make any mistake decisions, and we're smart with everything that we do. But the Dead Rabbit is a robust model, so I'm confident we will be able to weather it, albeit a lot of things are out of our hands in terms of the spread of the virus and federal decisions. They're just outside of our remit. So,
and obviously the results have paid off for you. You guys won Best Bar in the World twice in 2015, 2016. You've certainly been recognized, for your cocktail making and things like that. Like I said, youngest ever to win International Bartender of the Year. I'm just curious, when you start to receive those kinds of accolades and awards, how does that impact you professionally? Like, where do you go from there? Or, how do your goals change?
So for me, and I believe speaking on both of behalf of myself, I think the bar where we had it before we closed, it was the best that bar has ever been. So when you look at those awards, now that with a bit of maturity, awards were obviously when they came my way and our way, and I thought of my ego in winning those awards, to be perfectly honest with you. Listen, the awards have been hugely beneficial in terms of either the project. So first of all, you have to acknowledge that from the get-go, but they're not, to me, they're nice, but they're not the reason why you do what you want to do. And after we won those awards, I never really acknowledged those awards. We won those awards, and I'm the youngest recipient in the bar, won 2 years in a row and stuff like that. What matters is like what you do that day and the next day. And the bar we had it to a great place, but even with the shutdown, I didn't want to waste the opportunity afforded in terms of like, we've got all this time now to really focus on tightening our system. We're starting to look at scaling the company. So all the systems that we need to have in place facilitate that growth at a great level. So we're looking at that. We're looking at we're looking at things that we've wanted to change from a maintenance perspective. So we're 100% to better ourselves. I've just taken on I left my further education behind to pursue obviously the Dead Rabbit, but focus so exclusively on the operational side of the business. I've enrolled in an undergraduate administration course, and with my ultimate goal of getting into an next year to year and a half, and that's all to do with, I know Sean's a brilliant storyteller and a great strategist, so to speak, but I definitely want to help in terms of all the other underlying to facilitate that type of growth. Because one thing that we've noticed are sort of scaled in 2 different cities in different countries, but they pale into the motherships, so to speak. And I want to make sure that when we have a Dead Rabbit in Orleans, or we have a Dead Rabbit in Charleston, or we have a Dead Rabbit in Boston, or where, I want to make sure that that's a coherent, uniform, consistent product. And I also want to make sure that we don't lose our edge, because there's definitely a flips, like the C word, the corporate type word, in terms of like you lose your innovation, you lose your edge, and both those things are balanced. So that's really where my full focus is, and Sean's obviously focused on on his stuff with the brand side of things, and our partners are focused on other aspects of operations. But that's really where my head's at. I want to keep improving New York. I want to open the other venues and keep. Ultimately, I want Dead Rabbit to be the biggest Irish pub company in America, and hopefully becoming in the world. But it's that in and of itself isn't the same. Bigger goal is I want every city to have an authentic Irish pub, particularly in America, because there's not a lot of authentic McSorley's, that type of pub in each city. And we have goals that underlie that in terms of we want Irish whiskey, we want to really promote Ireland as a country. You know, a lot of things that we're hoping to achieve. And as I said at the start of this podcast, I very much view myself as in day one of our journey here. I still think we have a lot of things to do, grow, and a lot of ways to improve.
The job's just never done. Get it into some more serious type topics. I actually came across an article yesterday morning about the emotional toll of COVID on the hospitality and everything. You actually had some great quotes and suggestions in it. Trying to help people stay, because now that they're closed in and quarantined, stay kind of mentally fit and feel like they're not alone. Yeah. Upstate where I live in the Albany, Troy area, things are probably as close to normal as they can be at the moment. Obviously, people are still, you go out, you wear masks, the social distancing thing, but bars and restaurants are open for in and outside dining. It'll be interesting to see once the weather gets cold, how they try to supplement the outdoor stuff when you can't do it because of snow and cold. But what's the situation down there? Are you guys still only outdoor in the city?
Yeah, so we're exclusively at the moment now. There seems to be more of a lot of operators now advocating to address the indoor scenario. See, there's without getting too political, there's definitely hesitancy from Governor Cuomo and obviously Mayor de Blasio, and there's obviously an element of understand from a health perspective, but I think they need to establish a date in the city of resumption of indoor, so that we can all work toward in terms of addressing the air quality, addressing the standard operating procedures that are necessary opening the indoor. Because I feel like if we don't get to that point, there's going to be a study out that they're surmising that 2/3 of bars and restaurants in the city could close, and I don't think I think that could be even higher. Now we're only indoor. That's due to lapse, or outdoor. That's due to lapse in 31. And as you said, it's going to get colder, so that'll become less and less for people. So as much as I'm pressure on the decision makers, it's still not. I can see they're indoor for the rest of the year, but we might get 25-50%. I just don't know. The bars and restaurants will be, unfortunately, if there is an uptick in the spread, the very first things to shut down, just because of the transmissibility of the virus in public spaces. So it's not things aren't looking super clear when indoors going to resume.
Yeah.
And we can't do outdoor because we're right outside the front of the building. So we've been pretty handicapped in both of those ways. But as I said, the opening November 1, at least from a delivery to go, online events, merchandise perspective, just to keep the brand and keep our essential all of our employees are essential, particularly our leadership, to keep them engaged and keep ourselves engaged, because we've been since March 16th, and I think we need to do something just to get up out of bed.
I know you're a big mental health advocate, right? From some of the stuff I've seen.
Yeah, huge.
Online. Tell me about restaurant recovery. I'm super curious about that and how that came to be. Because I imagine that's going to play a role now more than ever.
It does, and unfortunately, restaurant recovery didn't. So it was a husband and wife had started the non-profit, and it was something that I still to this day I'm hugely above. But the big difficulty, so first and foremost, I had my own issues, and obviously still do. I've got to a point now that I can work through and sort of get through with it with the tools and stuff that I've developed. However, when I came through the other stuff, I wanted to raise visibility and sort of destigmatize the compound mental health, because I think there was a lot of awkwardness and that type of stuff around it. I did from the rooftops regarding my experience. And restaurant recovery, yeah, I thought to start connecting the dots of, and we still have yet to figure this out because I think now our industry is in a good place in terms of if a bartender or server or a general manager or a dishwasher is experiencing some type of health issue, we can now talk about it. I feel like we've got to that place where we're definitely on the way to destigmatizing. Unfortunately, however, because of the way that industry is set up over here in terms of insurance and that type of stuff, most of ours do not have health insurance. Now, there is, again, there's, without being too political, there's arguments on whether that should be from a federal level, a state level, or a level who covers that, and that's a whole other conversation. But from Europe, health was it's just a given. Like, you've got your health insurance sorted. Yeah. So for me, definitely wanted to connect the dots in terms of, it's great that we can talk about it. That's great, but talk about it, getting the support that you need in order to facilitate that journey towards being covered or maintaining your recovery. And that's what restaurant recovery was for. Ran into many obstacles in terms of actually extracting money from people in order the initiatives that we needed to do. So that's fallen to the wayside. And there's some organizations that have helped to talk about like your sleep and more kind of proactiveness in terms of yourself, your diet, your body, your mind. But I still think that there's a niche, and somebody addresses this and attacks it with full vigor, connecting those dots, because there definitely is we can talk about it, but in terms of getting the help, fortunately, it's not as fluid as it ought to be. So it's something that I definitely hope we can industry, because we've lost too many people to the bar and restaurant. It's an environment ripe for this type of problem.
Yeah, it's obviously it's not something the casual bar goer ever thinks of. Just, going to get a drink, having, a friendly chat with your bartender or things like that. Like I said, I'm not sure what publication the article I read was in, but it's fascinating when you think about it. Like, that is those people's social interaction pretty much, most of the time they're awake.
Totally.
So thinking of them being alone in quarantine can really cause some setbacks to, people that have been doing well and things like that. So, it's important to reach out to everyone and try to keep in touch. Like I said, you had some great suggestions, just trying to occupy the mind or things, even Zoom meetings. Like, as I point out, we're on Zoom, but
yeah, I mean, I think everybody at this point is fatigued with the whole pandemic, and that's obviously understandable. From like we've now had 6 months of this sort of no end in sight, but obviously the virus isn't getting fatigued very much there, and it's something that we need to be cognizant of and aware of our behavior. But this year, like I think I gave that into for the. Again, not to get political, but you've obviously the massive social unrest in the country, and you've the whole political kind of environment. So I don't even think we're aware of the long term consequences of this shutdown are going to be, even at this stage. I think it's going to be another year. So I'm very much excited. Not that I take any pleasure in what's happening right now, but I'm excited to watch the documentary on the pandemic in 5 to 10 years, how it all kind of shook out, because there's so much rewiring happening with the way that people are in, and There's so many things that we'd never thought we would end up we're doing right now. Keen to see how a lot of this works out, and even with being social, like working social with people is a muscle, and most of us haven't exercised that muscle in a long time, and that's going to there is I can't see how there wouldn't be an uptick in mental health problems because of that.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued to see how it all plays out. You know.
You know, the first thing that's going to happen, there'll be a movie about it. Not necessarily a documentary, but
Yeah.
someone will sign the rights. It's not going to take long. You know, as soon
Yeah.
as Hollywood's back up and running, that's going to be one of the first things. There's going
Yeah.
to be a lot of pandemic movies, I feel like.
Yeah. Well, I got bored quickly. Got bored of watching. I think there was only the two on the Contagion, and so I think we're definitely in need of some more pandemic movies. But I think on our feet when we've got this vaccine, I think we'll be good on a movie because we all lived it for.
Yeah, those. Hopefully, we can. You know, that point's not that far away. But let's get back to some
Yeah.
happier
I hope
stuff.
so.
The Dead Rabbit's currently closed.
Yeah.
You guys are reopening November 1st, as you touched on. You've touched on a few things. So what can people expect? Is it going to be takeout? Is it the online store is still open, of course, for people when it comes
Yeah.
to merch
So
and stuff like that?
yeah. So what the guests that to the space can expect is actually to get in the space. We will obviously limit the occupancy, but you'll come in. We're going to repurpose our front top room. Our original is just not conducive to the CDC or the NY State regulations of distancing. So we'll repurpose that as our merchandise store, where we'll sell our T-shirts, books, bags, whatever, like all the stuff that we sell will be done from there, and we'll have a bartender to go pint of Guinness or to go Irish coffee or to go cocktails that we have created, so you can get your mix of Dead Rabbit experience. So we'll have that. We will also have our delivery open, so we're going to deliver our food and our to-go drinks to Brooklyn Bridge on the east and the west side. So then I think there will be a demand for that, obviously, as we're getting into the colder months and the indoor is going to lapse, and there's a potential for the indoor not to reopen. So there will be a demand for delivery.
Oh yeah,
But
absolutely.
if they allow if they allow indoor, obviously indoor stuff, but at whatever occupancy they stipulate. Other things that we're doing, we're going to do outside catering, because I imagine family events and events for whatever group of people want to do those things that from their favorite bars or from their favorite restaurants. So we can cater those. So we can supply the drinks to that party, and we have an option built in that it can be execute tenders or our servers. And then we're also doing a online program. So I foresee that a lot of the big buildings, obviously this all changes to the pandemic and how things spread, but I think a lot of the big buildings around here and that we do an awful lot of events business with, their parties will potentially going to live in a virtual format. So we've come up with a 3-1, which is a corporate cocktail party where they can pick iconic Dead Rabbit drinks, 4 iconic Dead Rabbit drinks from our menu. We'll send them all the ingredients, and then we'll do a Zoom session now where we'll talk them through making the drinks and do that type of thing.
That's awesome.
Session, which is classic. Yeah, so we're excited. I think we could do well from it, but obviously enriching for our customers. We have another one which is a classic one, which is focused on customers who are making cocktails at home, but they don't have they haven't been able to make their favorite or their Manhattan or their martini or old fashioned. So we'll get on and make those drinks from our recipes to show them what that actually looks like, and we'll go through that for 60 to 90. We have another one that is geared on Irish whiskey and the Irish coffee. So we'll go through the history of things. And also we will send miniatures of all the components of the and a Irish coffee set. So we'll do a guided tasting of the different styles. And then at the end of the session, we'll make an Irish coffee with the participants and session. We're going to do that. We're going to do those the later two. We're going to do those once a month, October, and we're going to be announcing these in the beginning of next week. We wanted to give people. I think a lot of people will be starting to think about these Thanksgiving, Christmas type events now after we put it away. So we're going to announce that programming next week. So I think that the online virtual events, the outside catering, the delivery, some indoor stuff, I think with that we'll be in a position to reconnect with our customers and also we're carrying fairly significant chunk of debt right now that we need to start paying. So I think that'll enable us to start that type of program. That approach will enable it to pay down a significant portion of that by the end of the year. So I'm excited about it.
Awesome. That actually sounds like some pretty amazing stuff. I love the idea of, having the ingredients and then getting a virtual lesson in how I should be making it, as opposed to just pouring in a bunch of booze and a splash of club soda or something like that.
Well, keep an eye on our social, and once we're ready, you'll be able to partake in one of these sessions yourself.
I will. Yeah, I'll definitely have to keep an eye out for that, as well as the millions of listeners out there that'll hear this. I am curious. Obviously, you came up through the hospitality industry in Ireland there, really learning the basics and honing your skills. What were were there any surprise differences when you came to the States? The way things were done differently that kind of really surprised you?
Yeah, I mean, my bartending, from a customer perspective, it was vastly different. The customer, I don't know if this is, I think in most major cities, this is the first right now. But in terms of moving from Belfast and London to New York, the customers in New York just know so much more educated on their cocktails or on their beers or on their wines. They want you see these wine clubs or these beer clubs, and they just much so they know, they can sniff out straight away whether you know your stuff or you don't know your stuff. I very much knew that you had to be on top of your game in order to challenge your customers and present something that is exciting for them. So it's something that I realized from the get-go. And the second thing that was made very apparent is but the bar, particularly in Belfast and London, the bartenders are pretty proficient, but I wouldn't say they're not as affable or hospitable as the bartenders in America are, and whether that is because of the tipping culture, and the bartenders in America are much more engaged delivering that superior experience so that they can get that higher tip. I don't really know what the ins and the bartenders are what I would call over here. They're very much heads up bartenders. They're focused on the customer, where in England and in Ireland, I was very own bartender. I made the drinks. I got the drinks out to a world-class level, but I wasn't necessarily in the customer experience. Whereas when I came to America and I seen the bartenders like Doug, who worked in PJ Clark's, and obviously I'd been to the sessions with Dale the Grog, when you see these bartenders in all these different bars, their heads are up, they're looking at the room, engaged in the customer's experience, and that really changed my bartending. And I became a heads up bartender. I became I knew as soon as somebody entered the room, goodbye was needed, or a hello was needed, or can I help you? When the water wasn't at the right level, tail had dropped below the halfway mark, to check in to see if they wanted another. You become much more into the totality of the room. So it can my style of bartending coming from Europe to America, for sure.
Interesting. I find that fascinating. I actually do, because I've only been to bars in America and Canada, and I mean Canada's kind of the same. It's, not really that different.
Yeah.
You're still working on? Are you guys still working on opening the place in New Orleans? I believe I saw not long ago some.
Yeah. So we were slated to open that at the, what are we now? We're September, so we were slated to open that up in another month from now. Obviously, in light of the pandemic, we decided very early on that we did not want to open any type of occupancy restrictions or anything like that, because you've only got a chance to make your first impression. So we put that off until essentially just put it back a full year to the same period of next year, because I believe we will have the back broken. At least I think we'll have the vaccine. Most people will be mostly vaccinated. Well, I'm hoping that coronavirus will, by all intents and purposes, be and we will be in a much better position to open it up at that juncture. That's what we've done with New Orleans, and we're still very much operating under the assumption that we're doing five venues in 5 years.
Oh wow!
And locations that make sense. So that's the plan right now. I'm fully convinced in the plan. I'm convinced in the product and our business. But obviously we've had to just delay things in light of what we're all going on.
Awesome. Well, like I said, hopefully in a year from now, that's a totally different story and everything's 100% going forward again. Man, I hope so. Yeah. I obviously I miss live shows and concerts, and, just not having to worry about the mask, even though I'm not complaining about it a lot of people, but
yeah.
Well, hopefully we can get back to that point. So I think that seems like a good place to start.
I think we'll be there soon.
Yeah. Seems like a good place to start wrapping up. I have an antsy dog, I think, that needs to go out. So I think that's going to do it for this. Yes, absolutely. That's going to do it for this episode of Stories from a Bar. Big thank you, Jack. I really appreciate you, taking the time, like I said, to chat with me. Again, shout out to our mutual friend, Damien there, who, if it wasn't for Facebook, I don't know if I ever would have connected with him again, because we went years with, of course, not keeping in touch. And then he just randomly friended me on Facebook one day, and I don't remember how it came up. He just mentioned he had a friend in the city that ran a bar. So it had to have been after I started the podcast, which I've been doing for 2.5 years now. Yeah. So shout out to him.
Small world.
Small world, man. Small world. I appreciate you taking the time, hanging out, sharing some stories. It was great. You can keep up.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. You can keep up with all things Dead Rabbit. Check out their website at deadrabbitnyc.com. Be sure to follow the Dead Rabbit on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Anything else you want to throw in before we close it out?
No, I think you got everything.
Awesome. Big thank you to everyone out there for checking out the show. You can find Stories from a Bar on Facebook. Follow the show on Instagram and Twitter at StoriesFAB. You'll find episodes of the podcast, of course, on Apple and Google Podcasts, Podbean, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, and now also TuneIn and iHeartRadio. The show's growing, man. The show's growing. So be sure to subscribe. Even more importantly, leave a fantastic review and spread the word. So until next time, cheers.